Okay, we're live now. Let's need to. Okay, we are live, so you can go ahead and begin.
We'll call the meeting to order. Lisa, is there a confirmation notice for the meeting?
Yes, sir, media was notified.
Okay, we have a confirmation on the floor. I need a request to approve the agenda.
So moved. Second.
It has been made and properly second. Question? All in favor, let me know by saying that. Opposed, nay. Motion passed. Next, we'll move on to the South Carolina School Board Association workshop presentation by Scott Price.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Y'all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Hi. I appreciate the opportunity to come meet with you all today and talk to you a little bit about roles and responsibilities. There are some new folks, and it's a new year, and so it's a good opportunity to kind of review what we do together as a board and as a board superintendent team. And so I'm here to talk to you about that this morning. This is one of the few times I've been on the road in a while, so I appreciate that opportunity. One of the things that I thoroughly love about what I do is the opportunity to get out and be on the road. Now, if it's 10 o'clock at night and y'all are still in a meeting and I got to drive back, that's a little different, but that's okay. So I heard. But that's okay. That's the democratic process. And this time of year, you got a lot on your plate. I was just talking to Dr. Thomas a little while ago about how, my hat's off to you and my prayers are to all school boards and superintendents and students and teachers and administrators in South Carolina, because nationwide, but particularly in South Carolina, because we're in some unprecedented times and students have to learn. Students need to be learning, whether it's in face-to-face or whether it's virtually. The learning needs to continue, and so you all got a tall order to ensure that happens in a safe environment. And every day is different, and every day brings a different change, whether it's rules of engagement, so to speak, or whether it's CDC rules, or whether numbers in a particular district or area go up, go down. There's just a lot of things a lot of moving parts that are in front of you all right now. And I know that's extremely difficult to do the job that you were sworn to do, hired to do, and to take positions and to move in directions where you know that half the people aren't going to be happy with what you do and half are going to be happy with what you do. And that's just you make a reasoned decision together as a board superintendent team, and you move forward and you adjust as necessary. So I want to commend you all for where you all are in this process and the work that you're doing. And the School Boards Association, we're here to help and to give you all as much support and guidance and resources as we possibly can. So it's our pleasure to continue to serve you all. And again, thank you for having me here. We're going to talk about roles and responsibilities today, and we'll just kind of have an open forum here, if that's okay. If anybody has a question they want to ask, or a point or a comment they want to make, and we'll be informal and just chime in, and then we'll handle it as we go along. I do want to talk a little bit about the School Boards Association and some of the services that we offer. We, of course, have statewide conferences, and we've had to pivot a little bit on some of those, and I hope that you all had an opportunity this past weekend to participate in the school law conference. That was a first for us, And I felt like it was about 97% successful. On that very last day, on the very last session that we did, something happened. Something happened, and the audio was not working well. And we're still trying to figure out what caused it. We don't think it was anything internal. We recorded that session, so those of you who actually register for the conference will have an opportunity to have a recording of the entire session, including the last one that we had to not do because of the audio.
Whole Saturday morning?
No, it was just one, the last speaker.
Oh, okay.
It was Debbie Elmore, so if it was gonna be anybody, are we lying?
Yes.
If it was gonna be anybody to mess up on, then I would just assume that it had been Debbie, because she was right there. We just went ahead and recorded her, and we tacked that on. And you won't miss a beat. You won't miss a beat.
Well, she really wanted just to keep talking too.
Oh, she does.
That's Debbie.
That's her, she does.
That's Debbie, she's a talker. But, again, just like with you all having to pivot to different directions through all of this, we've had to do the same at the association. But we've had sort of a COVID-19 resource page that we keep updated, talking about how you conduct your work in the public, that sort of thing during a pandemic. And I hope that you all have found that to be useful as we kind of work our way through this together. So statewide conferences are something that we do. We have 3 major conferences throughout the year: the school law, the legislative conference. We've gone to virtual on that one, but we're going to be doing a drive-in face-to-face delegate assembly on that Friday. And we're doing it at the convention center, and it'll be in a big giant room, because we're gonna do it safely. And we're gonna be in a big room where we're asking every board to send 1 delegate. And I know that's a change from the past, because many boards have multiple votes, and they'll send multiple delegates to our delegate assembly. We'll have a big room with people. Mr. Hughes, we have that's our business meeting that we do every year. We do it at our legislative conference in December. And people are just jam-packed in there. And we have multiple delegates from every district, because you have the number of votes based on the number of students that you have. Say you have like a Greenville, for instance, that has 20-something votes. And we're asking Greenville this year to send us 1 delegate.
Oh, wow.
And what that requires you to do is to, as a board, to go through the positions that we have that we're asking you to vote on. And, if you've got a situation, and this happens, where you have a, 5-7 member board, 3 of you like such and such a position, and some of you don't, so you apportion your votes that way. So it's an extra step for you all at the local level, but again, in order to do this, we're asking for cooperation from boards and sending us just 1 delegate this year. So that's a big call for some people, because it's we're just asking for that cooperation, because that's the only way we're going to be able to pull it off face to face, if we can do it safely. And the ability to have distance between folks will be key to that.
We have that on our agenda for next month, planning.
Awesome.
Present that.
Awesome. If you have any questions about that as we go forward, just feel free to give me a call. On-site board training like today, that's another service that we offer. Superintendent search services this is another that we do. And when I'm talking about the on-site board training, one of the things that I've tried to do as executive director, I guess I'm in my 5th year there as executive director, is do more legal training. We do parliamentary procedure training. We do Freedom of Information Act training. So we're trying to do more and more to where we can come to you and offer that on-site training more than we've done in the past. And that's something I'm very excited about. And quite honestly, with the pivot that we've had to make to technology and Zoom meetings and things like that, it makes it that much easier for us to be in front of you not face to face, but certainly through a Zoom process. We've done that too. Policy and legal services is one of our bigger areas that we provide services in. We have, including myself, we have 3 attorneys on staff. now, and that was one of the things that I wanted to do as executive director, was to beef up the policy and legal services, because that's one of the most important things that you all do as a board, is policy development, and that's something that we can help with. Referendum consulting, Debbie does a session where she'll come in and talk to you about running a referendum and the do's and don'ts. We don't actually run the referendum for the district, but we do come in and talk to you about what you can and can't do, and help you get public input through focus groups and the like. Legislative and advocacy services is something else that is very important. The time that we spend in Columbia, sometimes I don't think they ever go home. Now lately it's been a little bit different with the pandemic. They'll be back in September to look at doing a budget for the next year, because they just passed a continuing resolution this summer. And so we'll be there, and the work that you do at the delegate assembly guides us in how we approach the legislature and the various bills that get filed over there. And so those resolutions are very important, because it's something that we use as guidance when we're talking to legislators about positions that we take as an association that you all approve legislatively. And that also includes advocacy at the national level, because we're a member of the National School Boards Association, and we more and more, especially in the pandemic, things that are going on in DC have an impact. If you all at the local level think of all the Emergency CARES Act funding and the like that have come through from the national level, and that's something that we have a presence naturally, trying to make sure that you're getting the best resources possible from Washington. Communication services, legislative updates that are, I think, bi-weekly during the session, and then our e-focus comes out once a week, and the e-clips. Does everybody get the e-clips? They come out every day, and sometimes I'll have a little legislative update on there. How's that? I love those e-clips. Whenever I feel like I'm having a bad day, I can go read through the clips, and I can guarantee there's going to be somebody out there that's having a worse go of it than I am. So it's kind of therapeutic in a way, because it does help with that. But it's also a good opportunity for you to see what's going on around the state and other districts. So it's something that we're very proud of, and I think very popular. SCSD, South Carolina School Board Insurance Trust, where we offer property and casualty insurance as well as workers' comp insurance. And I'm proud to say that Lawrence 55 is a member of both of those trusts, workers' comp and property and casualty. And we've also started or instituted a Stop It anti-bullying program, and you all are one of the first districts to sign up for that. So we're very proud of that.
Explain policy to us right there, since we're talking about policy, because we had a big discussion about policy last night in our board meeting. So can you talk to us about when y'all receive policy and then when y'all send it out to the boards and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, because if you should have gotten a copy, just it's good timing, because we just sent out yesterday our policy and legislative update manual. After the session ends every year, the legislative session, we shut the doors and go to work on looking at all the laws that are passed during the session. Sometimes we include federal laws that pass, Title IX, for example, and we develop model policies that we send out to you all to reflect changes in the law that you need to have reflected in your policies. So that's one way we do that. There also are court cases that are determined either the Court of Appeals, South Carolina, or Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court, or even the Fourth Circuit. Sometimes they make rulings that impact on your policies. And so we will send out updates that say, policy, whatever, you need to make this change. Some of the policies that we sent out were in relation to the pandemic, whether you all require masks with your students and the like. So you'll get something from us that talks about changes you need to make to your policy, and there might be something that's optional. And we'll put it there, whether you all can determine whether you want to do this or not. Sometimes policies are gonna be brought to you from the superintendent, recommended policy changes that she might pick up from somewhere, that she feels like you all might want to consider here at the local level. So there's various ways that policies are impacted. They all come to you as a board to adopt or not adopt. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess, one of them that we had a big back and forth with last night was the one about Title IX and the sexual harassment that had just come in. And then in the, law conference, the National School Board Association was pushing back on it. So I mean, if y'all send it out to us
Well,
and then they're pushing back on it, not to go forward with it.
if we send it to you all, it's going to be most likely because there's been a change at the federal level that requires, whether we push against something or not, the law is the law. And so, and I'm not speaking on anything in particular, but in a case like that, there are things we push back against either at the state level or at the national level that still get into the law despite our advocacy efforts. And you all have to reflect that change sometimes in your policy.
But would we want to wait before we implement or before we adopt policy until some of those advocacy requests on your part have been settled?
Well, I mean, that's really up to you all. I mean, sometimes you can take a position as a board on a particular change in a policy, because sometimes the law allows you to go maybe further. You can't do anything that's less restrictive, but in some instances you can go further if you wish. But if there's something in the law, I'm not speaking about anything in particular, but if there's something in the law that you might disagree with, you still need to have it reflected in your policy. But you can sometimes go further than what the law requires.
Well, if we don't have it there, we have to go under our old policy. If something fails there, then we're held liable and responsible, are we not? If we have not done anything with it at all, it's been tabled.
It depends on the policy. Again, sometimes you all have options and sometimes you don't. I've seen, many a times the legislature will pass something that says local districts will have policies that say this, 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 and this. And so therefore you need to have that in your policy. Whether it rises to being an issue of liability or not, again, depends on what the policy is, what the issue is.
Once we approve a policy through board, how long does that take once it's uploaded, the new version is uploaded to our site?
That I don't know. Usually it's pretty quick. We have 4 people in that department, so it's typically pretty quick. As soon as we get it, we send it to be uploaded in a matter of a couple of days, I think. Don't hold me to that, but
Okay,
that would be my plan, my goal,
okay,
is that it happens sooner than later. Because again, it needs to be reflected on. If you have your online service with us, and I think you do.
right.
For clarification, you just said from the state legislature, if they say you will have, it's almost like that's a direct.
Correct. Sometimes they'll put that in statute, Mr. Chairman,
So
where
we
they
can't
were-
change that, right?
where they require, unless we get the law changed. Good question. Okay, so School Board Association is your association, and then many of y'all, most of y'all are veterans of the board, and so they're involved in the association for a long time. We do have our Boardmanship Institute. I've talked about that. 2 days at the Capitol. We canceled that this past year. The date was right in the middle of all that vast shutdown and everything. That's an opportunity for us to have you all come to Columbia. We give you a briefing, and then we go meet with the legislature and talk to them about some of our issues. Regional meetings, we are planning on doing regional meetings this year. Sometime in October is what we're looking at. And it's my hope that we can do that in a face-to-face situation, again, where we're gonna have to probably limit the numbers that can attend, but we're looking at doing 3 this year. Mid-state, upstate, somewhere down in the low country area. That's another good opportunity for us to come where you are. And so we enjoy doing that, and those have been pretty popular over the years. The resolutions process, we have in March, we send out requests to everybody asking them about resolutions that they propose. We typically have 2 or 3 from the districts each year. That goes through a committee of the board, and then goes to the whole board, then it'll come eventually to the delegate assembly in December. And the delegate assembly is our business meeting. It is my sincere hope that we can conduct that face-to-face this year, obviously in a safe manner. Board of directors is, we have a 22-member board of directors. There are 16 regions in South Carolina. We have 2 districts, and it's based on numbers. So we have 2 districts, Greenville and Charleston, that are such large districts that they qualify to have, basically be their own region. But we meet 4 times a year as a board. We just had a meeting this past Thursday. We did a lot of committee work at that time, and so it's an opportunity for you all to be involved. You have an opportunity to get on our board of directors. So, I think it's a good experience that sort of allows you to kind of gather a statewide perspective of the education system in South Carolina.
Have y'all changed the election process before this?
Ma'am?
Have y'all changed the election process? You can still show up the day and be nominated from the floor.
Well, typically, yes, you can do a nomination from the floor, and if we do that, there are rules to how to do that properly.
You know that's just not right. You know I'm gonna get on to you again about that. It's just not right.
I understand that, but those are the rules, and it doesn't happen that often. It doesn't happen that often, but it does. We had a year once where our president-elect was being moved into that president-elect position, and somebody ran from the floor and beat her. Anyway, another way that you can be involved with the School Board Association is also through annual conference presentations, and we'll be sending that out very soon. Our annual conference is in February, and again, the plan right now is to try and do that face-to-face. And it's a good opportunity if you all got a program in your local district that you're real proud of, something that's working, you want to share with other districts. You can apply to present that at our annual conference. And it's a good opportunity for others to learn from what you all are doing well here in March 55.
And how do y'all choose those? Because I know we've applied for stuff, but we didn't get chosen.
It's a process that has a lot of factors. Sometimes we get multiple requests for pretty much the same thing. We try to look to see who's presented in the past, whether we try to look at district sizes. There's a lot of factors that go into how we make that determination.
Okay.
Webinars, that's something that we're doing more of, again, as we, and it's something that we need to do anyway as an association, because it's an opportunity, it's cheap, it's easy. Technology can mess you up from time to time, but generally it's something that we can do, maybe like during the lunch and learn session. We've got a couple of those coming up in the next couple of weeks, so you'll be able to look out for that. Again, lunch and learn, they're kind of leftover sessions from the school law conference. And then advocacy, I think you all have a policy that talks about board advocacy. I've always felt that you all at the local level are basically our best lobbyists in terms of positions that you take, hopefully that are aligned with the School Board Association, that we're in the same alignment. But, all politics is local. And, the ability that you all have at the local level to have an impact on your legislative delegations is very important. So advocacy, in my mind, is one of the biggest roles that you have as a board, to be an advocate for public education. for your school district. And making sure that your legislators, before they get to Columbia, understand how things are at the local level. So let's talk about understanding roles and responsibilities. Statutory section 59-1990 is basically sets out a broad list of responsibilities for school boards in South Carolina. The thing includes things like, running schools, policy development, budget approval, monitoring systems, fiscal accountability, Freedom of Information Act, and being transparent. Ethics Act is something that's also applicable to school boards. And basically, all school boards are considered, school board members are considered leaders in your local community by the very fact that you were elected or appointed in some instances to occupy that position. So being elected or appointed to the local board gives you this phenomenal ability to have a positive impact on your education system at the local level. And I know that's something that everybody takes very seriously. If you look at Section B, Section B is in your policy manual, one that focuses mostly on your roles, your responsibilities, differentiates between the superintendent job and your job. There are a number of things in there that talk about how you're elected, filling vacancies, committee structures, whether you all have standing committees or appointed committees. Code of ethics is in Section B. Conflict of interest, which falls under Code of ethics. Nepotism, anti-nepotism policies are under Section B. This is South Carolina, and nepotism is alive and well in our state. We all know that. Rules of order and how you conduct yourself as a board. Again, that's all in your policy. So to me, it's something that if you hadn't had an opportunity to look at Section B, you've got a big giant policy manual in front of you. That's the first place to start. That's the section that governs you all, governs you as a board.
And that's in that notebook.
And it's in your notebook. So much of what I talk about today is going to be focusing on your policies. And just for instance, board powers and duties is in your policy under policy BBA. And we've already talked about policy making. That's one of the major roles of the local board is policy development and improving policies. 30,000 foot level for the board is implementation of policies being through the superintendent. Policy development, superintendent is the implementer, if that's the correct word, of policies. You all also exercise executive authority as a board. And basically, that's hiring and firing superintendent and holding him or her accountable through the evaluation process and the like.
Question.
Yes.
Okay, you're talking about holding the superintendent accountable. I understand about evaluation and stuff like that. But this day-to-day operation thing and micromanagement, that seems to be an issue.
You all probably, I don't have it in front of you, but you probably have very clear directives, should, in your policies, and we'll talk about it in just a few minutes, that talk about clear roles of the board, clear roles of the superintendent. And the whole idea is to try and prevent micromanagement, to prevent the board from, you all, I imagine most of you have jobs. And if you look at 59-1990, the state puts a lot of responsibility on you as a board. If you as a board, through your policies, have decided we're going to basically authorize the superintendent to carry out much of what we're responsible for as a board.
That one word, board. No one read as a whole, as a.
You're getting ahead of us.
But just, just saying board, so no one.
Well, you're getting ahead of it. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But when you look at, again, look at what your overall authority is, quasi-judicial, I mean, you all sit as a court of appeals sometimes, depending on whether you've got a student discipline issue or an employee issue that comes before you. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes too. Because, you know, you take yourself out of the game if you get too heavily involved on the front end of some of these issues that are going to come to you in your role as an appellate body at a later point. And at that point, you're not helping anybody. Evaluating or appraisal of policies, to basically evaluating the effectiveness of the policies. That's another responsibility of the board. Planning and continuous improvement, obviously is a key responsibility. And interpretation, I basically think about that as advocacy, basically being the link between the district and the citizens, and being advocates for the district and making sure that the community understands the things that are going on in the schools. Hopefully they're good things, but sometimes there might be things that need to be discussed that aren't so fortunate at the local level. Being that advocate, being that link between the district and the citizens is very important. Operationally and running effective board meetings, again, you've got policies that talk about Freedom of Information Act, agenda development, and the like. And so those are clearly in your policies. And of course, budget approval and making sure that you're providing the necessary resources as a board to be able to carry out the various responsibilities that you have. One of the things that I didn't see that on the last one.
It's covered up.
Mine got cut off. That was intentional, I think. Somebody in the back may have done that.
You got two down there cut off.
Well, the two that were cut off were reviewing action and being the final authority. Basically, you all have the final authority within the law for the operations of your schools. And the other one that was on there was visiting schools. And if you look at your policy, okay, visits to schools under policy BBA. There actually is a provision in statute that says you are responsible for visiting schools from time to time. Every district, every board out there, though, has a protocol for doing that. This is not an opportunity to conduct a surprise inspection, particularly when we're trying to be mindful of who all's in the schools, whether it's a safety issue or whether it's a health issue. So this is straight out of your policy language. And again, I don't know if that's not a problem here, but there are some districts where board members they like to do the surprise inspection. And that's not the purpose for visiting schools. What are some good purposes for visiting schools in your district?
Yeah, just getting back the staff and people know who you are and just seeing how it's going.
Well, are you all single member districts, or you okay? So you maybe have parts of the Lawrence 55 district that you don't necessarily represent.
Right.
So it gives you an opportunity, just for example, to go visit some of the schools in some of the other districts, some of the other election districts or zones, so that when you come back to the board and you're looking at the budget or looking at making sure resources are evenly distributed and equitably distributed, you'll have a better understanding of what's going on in some of the other areas that you may not represent. So to me, that's a really good example of why it is important to be present in schools from time to time, following the protocol. Do I have any questions or anything? Okay.
What about just dropping in like for lunch, stuff like that? Is that appropriate or just?
I think that's fine, Terry. But again, it's the kind of thing that if you go back and look, make sure that you're doing it as you're supposed to do it. Instead of just dropping in and saying, I think I'll swing by and have lunch there. Because again, it can be disruptive to what's going on. Because when a school board member walks into a school, people pay attention to that. And so again, I think you want to do it in a manner that allows you to be a presence in the school, but also follows protocols so that it's not a disruption, or it's not seen as, what is she doing here? Which I think everybody has that inclination.
Well, I have girls in the district and they were at 2 different schools, and this coming year they'll all be at the same school. But for those schools that they are in, I was popping in all the time, but I think that the people there knew, the staff and the teachers, they knew that I was popping in because of a child issue, or not an issue even, but just a child need.
Well, you're in a unique
Board
situation.
member.
You're in a unique situation. We're gonna talk about that in just a few minutes. I've got a scenario that touches on that. Because whether you like it or not, you are a school board member. And it's tough for you as a school board member who's also a parent to figure out which hat you're gonna put on when you go into that school. So you just have to be mindful of that. And I don't have a particular formula to share with you about that, other than when you're talking to the teachers about your child, parent-teacher conference or whatever, they're still thinking of you as a school board member.
Well, and I'm very mindful too, like I never email almost a child issue from my school account. I only use my personal account, so I'm very mindful of that.
They still know who you are.
But yes, I know.
And sometimes we've had, situations in the past where that has happened and that person had to get his spouse to do it. So it's not because of that hat changing.
Yeah.
And people don't see the difference. You gotta basically say announce it, but they don't see the difference when things come up and it got real sticky.
I think they would rather deal with me, even as a board member, than have to contend with.
Well, I'm just saying what was best for that person,
Right.
yeah, because legally there were some actions that were brought, yes. So you have to kind of be mindful of that hat.
You can't provide family counseling.
Right.
You can, but again, it's an extraordinary situation, but it's one, and it sounds like you are very mindful of that, because even in that situation, grandkids even, they still know who you are, and that element's there. Whether you believe it or not, that element is there. Just need to be mindful of that.
I know that, when my son was in school, that I was a board member, like when school would start and I would go in and meet the teacher, and I'd say, okay, I know I'm a board member, and I just want you to know I'm in here as a parent today. This is my son. I don't want you to feel uncomfortable with me in here today. I know you know who I am, and I'm not gonna.
And they're thinking, sure.
Yeah, I know, but I was mindful of that, and I think to some degree, I went to the extreme of not being as involved with things that I probably should have been more involved with, because I felt like they would have thought I was overstepping my bounds, of being a parent. And now that I'm a grandparent, I've done the same thing. When I go to, visit my grandchildren's friends, I say, I'm just here as a grandparent, but they're still looking at you, so I feel uncomfortable even going and visiting their rooms or doing anything in their rooms. They say, come watch me, I'm doing this, they're all in Montessori stuff, that they do all these little readings, and they're like, come watch me. And when I've gone, like on their Friday mornings, I see all the teachers and stuff, they're just like, they're all just like staring at me. It just affects the whole thing, and I see it affect the whole thing. So I don't go, but then it makes me miss out.
Well, again, there's a balance.
Yeah.
And it's not easy.
Yeah.
It's not easy, because especially in smaller communities.
Yeah.
Everybody knows, you probably go to church with half the people that you see in the schools.
So how far can we go in there? And what I mean by how involved can we be? I've been to the school one time, I was standing there with the principal, and a fight actually broke out right single feet in front of us. And I have the principal in the game. I mean, was I wrong? I mean, because sometimes instinct.
You know, Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure, as an attorney, I'm gonna say probably the thing to do is let the authorities handle that as opposed to you intervening. You know, maybe there was a SRO available that should have stepped in and you might have kept them from doing their job. So it depends. I mean, that's the legal response. It depends on the circumstances. I would caution against wading into a melee like that, unless you're the person.
I agree with that, but when you have 3 students on one, you want to wait around for resource officers.
Well, we all react differently to different scenarios and different situations, but I would just say in general, in a situation like that, it's probably better to allow the school personnel to handle that as they need to do so. Again, I wasn't there, I don't know the urgency of the circumstances, but
I understand what you're saying.
I'd caution against getting overly involved like that. It could be a liability issue.
Look, Anthony gets thrown out of basketball games.
I am big.
So, anyway, these are good questions. Moving on to the next slide, policy BDD. This is where it basically sets out the boundaries between what you as a board do and what the superintendent's job is. And I apologize for that being uneven. It's not uneven on my slide here. But, you know, the board selects the superintendent selects the staff. Now, if you look at the statute, 59-1990 has you all doing the hiring and firing. But that's something that you relegate to the superintendent, because the superintendent is the one that you're going to be holding accountable for, you know, academic performance and the like, how the district is run. And if he or she's having to deal with people that you enforce, that you insist that he or she hires or whatever, how can you hold the superintendent accountable ultimately for that? Again, I know this is South Carolina and I know how things work, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes, but it's very important to respect that division of authority between what you as a board have and what you relegate to the superintendent, and allowing her to basically conduct her job as set out in policy. But we've talked about, you know, setting policy and adopting the budget, you know, based on recommendations and proposals from the superintendent, approving personnel matters. She'll bring to you the teacher contracts and the like for you all to approve. You don't have the time to go through every individual contract, you just don't. So that's the way the system typically works. And staff matters through the superintendent, basically chain of command. Again, you don't have the time to get involved in some of those issues, and you are going to basically negate your ability to have an impact on something later when it comes before you as a board in your capacity as an appellate body.
So that approving those, like we had some names last night that are going into new positions or starting. I mean, do we have to approve that? I mean, do we have any authority to approve it? If we single out one of those names and everybody votes no, they're still just as hired by the district as it was before we said no. Is that just going through the motions there? I mean, why are we doing it?
Well, ultimately, again, statute has the board hiring and firing, 59-1990. And it's talking about teachers. You know, you all as a board basically tell your superintendent your policy. You bring to us recommendations that we'll act on. And sometimes if you're talking about multiple hirings that you're going to be doing, you have to rely on your superintendent to bring the best
I
people to
agree.
you.
I'm a carman, Rob's a carpenter, she's got a doctorate in education. I don't see why we have to be involved in that, but I guess we do. If we do, we do.
Well, the statute says so, but again, your policy says you rely on her and you base your decision based on her recommendation.
I do. Because we've never met them or interviewed them or anything. So we basically just giving the nod that they did a good job when they hired them, I guess. I mean, or just supporting.
So again, you're relying on your superintendent to bring you the best recommendations on hires. And, because again, as a board, you don't have the time to get down into the weeds on every applicant, and you rely on her to do that and hold her accountable for that.
But if we did get down in the weeds on one particular one and everybody voted no, would it matter? They still hired.
Sure, well, you all, and that has happened, and they're not hired. And that has happened. It's unfortunate, because I think once you start down that road, but that does happen, because ultimately, you all are the ones that, as a board, have responsibility for hiring and firing.
So if she brought the list to us and we decided that one on the list, we didn't want to have that job, we could say, we could pull them out.
That can happen.
And so then she would have to go back then and say, I'm sorry, the board has
That
not
can happen.
accepted your.
That can happen.
And if, especially if there's a SLED check that's not completed, because sometimes we hire, it is in the process of being completed, and not necessarily complete.
And
waiting on everything.
The danger of that, Terry, is because again, you see this in districts where the danger is micromanagement, where you're involved in hiring, firing as a board. Again, statute says that's your responsibility, but you as a board have said through the policy, we're going to give that responsibility to the superintendent. We're going to base our decision on her recommendation.
Well, I guess it would have to be something.
We can scenario this thing to death, but I think ultimately,
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to have something really strong to
and quite honestly,
pull
that,
somebody out.
And Mike, just to let you know, that's something that really, there's a huge list in the spring one time, and then there may be smaller groups, maybe once or twice throughout the year. It typically is one large group in the spring, so that's not something that is done on a monthly basis. There just happened to be some changes that it had to come up last night.
Well, I would never question Ms. Thomas or, she's got a doctorate in education. I'm a carman. So I don't need to be picking. But anyway,
but you rely on her.
I would go with her, yeah.
And you have a right to. Yeah. And you have said so in your policy.
I just didn't know if we voted no, would that mean anything, or we just going through the motions?
Well, again, I think if you, it's more than just going through the motions. I'll tell you
After
that.
last night, anything we can not do going through the motions will be a positive thing.
I mean, but if you know something, share, I mean, it's not even that serious or something. You
Moving
know.
on. Moving on.
Yeah, after last night, we discussed, never mind, okay.
Well, at this time, you guys are the governing board. And you have to leave it to your superintendent to manage the district. You just don't, you're a car guy. You don't have the time or the expertise to do that, but you have a right to rely on your superintendent to do that in your stead. So let's talk about a quick scenario here. A board member posts a question on Facebook asking for input on a high school English teacher's behavior and action. She states in the post that her daughter is upset because of the way the teacher runs her classroom and wants to know if others are having the same concerns. She goes to the superintendent with the Facebook comments and concerns and says she wants something to change. Is this good governance? Is this overstepping, or is this just a bad idea all around?
Candy, is
Bad
that on
idea.
Facebook?
Yeah, it has to be on Facebook.
Names have been
For me-
changed, protect the innocent.
For me, it don't matter, because I've never been on Facebook, don't know what it is, and never will. Y'all have fun.
Bad idea.
I think that's a complete bad idea.
I would, yes, thank you. It's bad governance, it's overstepping, and it's a bad idea. Because, you know, you're an elected official, and you do have constituents that you have to contend with. If you're hearing reports about a teacher, you need to pass that along. Follow the chain of command. It's in your policy. Pass that along to the principal. Something doesn't happen at that level, pass it along to the superintendent, let her handle it. You have a chain of command, and you just can't get involved at that level, because again, you may have to oversee something as a judicial role later on involving that teacher. What about,
If y'all see it on Facebook, don't email it to me, I don't wanna know.
well, what about, can you control these comments? If you're soliciting comments about a teacher on your Facebook page, for example, can you control that?
No.
No.
Can you determine what somebody posts up there? Maybe you can take it down and block it, but it might be out there. Somebody's gonna screenshot it. All of a sudden, you might be facing some liability. Because you can't, defamation is an actionable offense, and that's something that you can be sued for. So you have to be careful about that, because social media can go crazy sometimes. You can't control what others put on your page. When you start down that road, and you ultimately can face some damages for that, just say that way. What about if you're, and this, Kathy, gets back to what we were talking about. I mean, you know, you can't, as a school board member, give the impression that that teacher works for you, because that teacher works for the superintendent, principal, and then on so up. So you just have to, it gets back to that gray, fine line of being a school board member, wearing that hat, and being a parent. And it's not easy. It's not easy, but it's something that and it sounds like everybody here understands that and is at least mindful of that. And so I consider that a victory. Board superintendent relationship, hiring the superintendent is probably one of the most important things that you do. If you look at your policy, board policy BDD, and I think we talked about that just a few minutes ago, it talks about how you basically give a lot of your authority or delegate a lot of your authority as board to the superintendent. The board and the superintendent, as you all have discovered, will discover, are discovering, you're the education leadership team for the district. And you have to, in order for this team to work, you have to understand your role versus the role of the superintendent and vice versa. What are some good characteristics that should be present in a good board superintendent relationship? Communication.
Respect. Respect.
Respect. What about transparency?
Oh, yes.
What about making sure that each of you has access to the superintendent more than maybe one person?
Yes.
So that when nobody likes to be surprised at a board meeting. And you're going to find, and we'll talk about this in a minute, but you're going to find.
And that goes both ways.
But you're going to find in most instances, probably, if somebody comes to the superintendent and wants information, that information will be provided, but it's going to be provided to the whole board.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that instead of seeing it on an agenda, it's not communicated beforehand.
Well, communications are important.
Yeah.
Obviously, communications is
Where
important.
you get a packet, it's on the agenda.
That's better than it being added to the agenda,
Well, yeah, but
which is a FOIA issue in and of itself. But, depending, under emergency situation, you can do something like that. Yeah, I mean, it's. I think communication is very important. I think transparency is very important. I think respecting the job that you hired the superintendent to do and that you've been elected to do, and goes both ways, is very important. I think those are all traits of a good working relationship. business relationship. Doesn't mean you have to be friends. Doesn't even mean you have to agree all the time on just as you as a board.
Right.
You don't agree always on what the issue might be in front of you. But you get on the agenda, you debate it, take a vote, move on.
Right.
To agree, disagree, agree, disagree.
And that's something that we're moving away from.
Moving on seems to be a problem.
Well, that's something, quite honestly, Mr. Chairman, that, it's a civility issue as much as anything. And, I think it ties into social media, how easy it is to go out there and blast somebody on social media. They're not.
Don't know how, don't want to know.
Bless you.
I know.
Doesn't mean they're not gonna be blasting you on social media.
I wouldn't see it anyway.
You just wait.
I
So,
won't see the comments.
Can you just touch on, we had someone in the past who's on the board, they would always say things like, well, I didn't vote for him anyway, so they didn't feel like they had to agree or vote on anything suggested. So it doesn't matter. If you voted on the person, I still gotta respect them.
well, I mean, again, this talks about what was mentioned earlier, might have been uses and that, you take action as a board. Nobody on this board has any authority as a single person, unless it's the chair or unless somewhere the board has voted to give Terry, for instance, certain authority to do something and then report back to the board. That's the only time they're gonna have authority as an individual board member. And if you look at the statute, it talks about the board, that somebody listens to the board. You don't have authority. And again, your policies reflect that. You look at the policy language, it says you can't do this on your own body. You need to get 3 other people to go along with you before you can do something on your board. And in order to do that, that means you've got to cooperate, you've got to work with someone and take it on. So that's why when people get elected to the board, they come in there and say, we're going to fix this. I've been elected to the board, I'm going to come there and fix it. A year later, they're very frustrated sometimes because they have 6 other people they have to deal with on that board. They've been told by their constituents, we're going to come here and do something. So it's about working together as a board with a common goal, with a common mission that you all set together as a board with your superintendent. So we talked about this. It's sort of a core principle on governing and managing. I think we've talked about micromanagement and the need to avoid that, so I will not belabor that point. Board superintendent relationship, I mean, basically, the board superintendent is the CEO for the district. And they are essentially a member of the board. Now, they don't have voting power, but what times can you even think of where the board would be meeting without the superintendent? And maybe if you're talking about evaluation or contract negotiations. But beyond that, I can't think of any reason why the board and the superintendent would be meeting apart. Again, unless it has something to do with the contract or something. So should the board ever set a course for the district without the superintendent being involved in that? See, all of that is and we've talked about this, there's nothing more important in this relationship than dealing honestly, ethically, straightforward, and aligned. And having the knowledge of what you can reasonably expect from each other. Again, like you set those expectations in the contract, you set those expectations in the evaluation process, and the goals that you work out with the superintendent. Okay, another quick scenario. How am I doing on time?
11:09.
Another quick scenario.
In fact, would y'all like to take a 5-minute break?
I'm fine.
I'm getting towards the end.
Y'all at least eat something. Y'all at least eat something.
He said he's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, a classified job.
Okay.
An has been posted properly per district policy. A board member called the superintendent to advocate for the hiring of a specific individual, stating that they are a good person and in need of a job. They feel that since they are on the board, they should have a say in the hiring of staff. Is this you, Terry?
No,
This is Susan? Okay.
no, no, I would never.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing. Okay, good governance, overstepping, bad idea.
It's just all the above.
All of the above. This is certainly bad governance and overstepping. Because I think that can amount to, ladies, I think that can amount to putting in proper pressure. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I didn't mean to intervene in that. Most likely, many districts and boards, superintendents and boards basically have an unwritten agreement in place. And you all might want to think about something like that. Because, again, you're elected officials. You got cousins, you got neighbors, and they want jobs and the like, and that's just the way it is. No matter what, not even just in South Carolina, that's just the way it is. You do have anti-nepotism policies, right? Again, we don't have time to talk about all that. But you ought to think about if you don't have a procedure in place whereby, Barbara, if somebody comes to you and says, hey, can you get Billy a job? You might say to them, all I can do is make sure Billy gets an interview. I can't guarantee anything else. So that might be something that you all think about working out, because that takes the heat off you. That takes the pressure off you. That's why it comes to you wanting a job for somebody.
That's what I've done. I said, let me give you Miss Madden's number.
Right.
Well, yeah, it's gonna happen. It's just gonna happen, and you need to make sure that you're not, as a board member, putting undue pressure on the superintendent to hire a friend, a relative, or whatever. The other thing you gotta be careful about is that possibly is an ethics violation, particularly if it's a family member, immediate family member, and you're trying to get them a job. That's an ethics violation. I'm looking at you two while I'm saying that.
But it used to be years ago that when a person was hired in the district and the spouse was to work, there was an unwritten understanding between the neighboring district that that person would be hired there. And they did that for a long time to come in the past. And it really worked well. It was not written or anything. It was just a gentleman's handshake or an understanding, which was years ago. Or since that's superintendent has passed on, but I mean, it really worked good. You didn't have a lot of, we had some, but it wasn't near as bad. And that other person went to work in the neighboring district.
Well, it's gonna happen, does happen, it will happen, it'll continue to happen. And like I said, most districts have some sort of an unwritten process in place for how to deal with that. That helps you, helps the superintendent, basically get you out of a tight situation where you just say, all I can do is pass it along and get Billy an interview, that kind of thing.
I mean, do we have to even say we can get them an interview, or, I mean, that's
That's
kind of
just-
pushing it to me.
Well, that may be too much for y'all, it may be too far.
I mean,
No,
like I said, I just said, I can give you Miss Madden's number for you to contact or whatever.
Now,
Well, I'm sure too.
getting somebody an interview doesn't get a job, so.
Right,
Yeah.
that's true.
Again, that's.
But I think if
I'm
they
not-
call, you know,
making it
my
clear.
point is on that, if somebody calls and says, Miss Martin told me to call you about setting up an interview, well, what does that say to the human resource person?
Mhm.
That, you know, then she's feeling like, oh, well,
Well, and
Ms.
again,
Martin
that's
is
undue pressure that you don't,
recommending that
that you
this
don't want
person,
to avoid that.
that I interview this person, you know.
As a reference.
Yeah, well, I mean, being a reference on something is different, I think, than them calling up and requesting an interview based on, Ms. Martin told me to call and request an interview. Right.
You all decide that. I think you understand the point.
Yeah.
Individual board members, we talked about individual board member authority. Again, your authority is through your actions as a board as a whole. Local laws, I'll just mention this. We talked about the chair has specific authority that's in your policy. Certain authority may be delegated to a member of the board, but beyond that, there's just one person. Local laws that are also reflected in your policy, and we mentioned those earlier. And it's different for every district. Local laws are not good because it sets up. If you look at the governance structure across South Carolina, boards are so different. Some are elected, some are elected and appointed. We have one appointed board, we have one that's a mix. Your fiscal authority differs from board to board. It's just we would argue for some uniformity legislatively, but local legislative delegations have that authority to pass laws that just impact this district, this board. Whether that's good or bad, it's the way it is right now. Code of ethics, we talked about that. The board is not bound by any actions or statements of an individual board member. Information requests to the superintendent. That's fine. I think it's even the landscape legislatively has changed such that, quite honestly, school boards need to be asked more questions when it comes to things like, academic achievement. You're going to get a report card. So boards need to be aware of what's going to be on that report card and why. And you all need to ask questions about that. They passed the Fiscal Authority Act a couple of years ago. And it's also in Proviso 1A.12, where districts can get in trouble, boards can lose their management, they can be pushed aside by the State Department of Education for getting into financial difficulties. So it makes it incumbent upon you all to have a good understanding of, when the audit's due, what does the audit say? And we have questions we have a publication called Get On Board. It's on our website, and it talks about questions that board members can ask that are relevant to the report card, or relevant to the audit, questions you can ask relative to finances. Because again, things have changed over the past couple of years, and you can get into trouble with the state for not doing certain things, or for doing certain things a certain way. And this is something that we've pushed back against at the state level, because we feel like local control is best, but it's been kind of an uphill battle. And we talk about this too, because you all are going to go to the superintendent and say, hey, can I get some information on this? All I would say is two things. One is make sure that we don't find ourselves in a situation where the superintendent is spending a majority of his or her time dealing with board requests, because they do have a district run. And also understand that it could be a situation of where information is going to be provided to everybody. That's the way it should be. Terry, if you go in there and ask for information about something, then the whole board is going to get that.
May I ask a question? When information is shared like that to the whole board, is there some sort of, as the board secretary, is there some sort of documentation or filing that I need to keep in case of, you know what I'm saying? Because if all the board members are participating in the,
Well, it's going to be shared, it's probably a meeting situation would be my guess.
oh, okay. I just didn't know like.
Where it's public information anyway.
Okay. So like emails, if they,
Well,
I don't need to print
the
those.
concern about that's a good question. The concern about that is if you are operating where emails, so Terry sends an email to the superintendent asking for information. Superintendent collects that, sends it to all of them. You respond back, then you respond back. Are you conducting a meeting?
That's my question.
I think somebody can make an argument that under the Freedom of Information Act, you're running the risk of conducting an illegal meeting. You get that back and forth going, so it's better to do that sort of thing within the regular meeting.
I mean, when you tell us that, but how do we slow it down? Because a lot of things that we deal with, you don't have an achievement of bringing people in line.
So,
I say a lot of things that we deal with, you don't have an achievement of bringing people in line, and you just continue to do the same thing. But I don't think it's fair for individual board members to go back and forth with the superintendent on how you're gonna operate. I don't think it's fair. But we do it, but I'm saying when it happens, how can we stop it or slow it down?
well, I mean, that's a good question because I'm not, some districts, you know, Beaufort, for instance, I'll just say that even though we're live, some districts have we all have policies that talk about, you know, the best way to communicate with the superintendent and the like. But at the end of the day, there's not a whole lot. There's not much, as you said, teeth to that. You know, the only things that you can really do is sometimes you'll see situations where the board officers, maybe the chair, the vice chair, secretary will get together and counsel the board member and say, look, you know, you're doing such and such. It's the better way to do it. That's one way of trying to handle that. You can censure a board member, but I don't think that ultimately does anything more than air out dirty laundry. So there's really not a whole lot you can do other than counseling.
So how do you handle in between board meetings when information is being given? So like if Dr. Thomas brings information to us by an email.
I think that's fine. What I'm saying is if you find yourself in a situation where there's this back and forth going on, then it can be a problem. It can be a problem. I'm not saying you're breaking the law. I'm just saying that you run the risk of there being enough back and forth where somebody can say, well, they're holding a meeting because they're discussing board business electronically and it's back and forth and there's a quorum of the board participating. So you just need to be careful about that. I'm not saying you can't share information via email, that you can't have some discussion email. You just need to be careful about that. That's all I'm saying.
So you can reply back or you can make a comment back or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think that's fine to do that, but you have to be careful. That gets back to the legal answer of it depends. Just be mindful of that, be careful about that.
My question was because, you know, like they said, we do between board meetings, there's some things that come up sometimes. And I didn't know, because I know by law, I'm supposed to have any action of the board or something like that, you know, available for public review and all that. And I just didn't know if that was something I needed to be printing every time they emailed or whatever. I mean, okay.
Doesn't mean that somebody's not going to make a request.
Okay. But not as a general rule. Okay. I just don't want to get it.
Okay. Just be careful. That's all. That's kind of a non-answer, but that's.
Yeah, well, I think it goes back to communication too. I mean, there needs to be open communication between the board and the superintendent. You know, and probably a lot of the conversations that are being referenced here are, in effect, unprecedented conversations because of the current situation that we're in. And those are things that there are no answers. You know, there are no 100% right answers. So to have conversation and to make suggestions or have idea, right, I mean, it's just having that open communication.
It may be that if something garners enough discussion electronically, the chair would then say, why don't we put this on the agenda?
When you talk about, you're not, when you talk about open communication, you're talking about punishment. Okay, but now, if you are talking to the superintendent and you making a demand, you say, I want it now, to me, you're simply down. That is disrespectful. And number one, it's disrespectful. But number two, that's what I'm saying about not having teeth. How do we reel somebody in that's like that?
Well, again, there's not a whole, it's just like with executive sessions. And probably the biggest problem that we have is people talking, board members being in an executive session and going out and talking about it, breaching that confidentiality. Barbara, at the end of the day, there's nothing that you can do. There's nothing in the law that says that you can find somebody for that. Now, you know, again, some districts, again, I think of Beaufort, they've tried to put some teeth into some of those provisions where the board, if somebody is an officer, for instance, the board can basically vote to unofficer them. You know, make them not an officer anymore, or if they're on a committee, the board can vote to move them off that committee. So there are things like that. But, you know, I would hope that, you know, we're all adults here.
Yeah, I mean, that's just gonna make things worse. I mean, in
Well,
my opinion,
it might make
it's just a confrontational type thing because like, you know, one of the things like Kathy was saying with it being is situational right now. I think what is going on and just like the conversations that have occurred, we've gone into this situation starting in July with a brand new superintendent, with a pandemic, with we don't know how the school started. We're all stressed out. We've been out of school since March. We're starting a whole new situation with, we're not real sure how the new superintendent is gonna address things, excuse me. And I think that is what a lot of this has played into, and a lot of just the uncertainty and, you know, not taking anything away from Dr. Thomas, but we went from a superintendent that was over the top communicator, over the top providing communication, over the top giving information, over the top calling us, texting us, providing us with information to the other side. And, you know, we don't have that now with Dr. Thomas. And I think that that's causing a lot of anxiety among those of us on the board that, and I'm not taking anything away from her abilities to run this district at all. Nothing of that sort. I'm just talking about the communication level. And I think that brings about the anxiety level of the board members then, because the people in the community then are saying, what are y'all doing? You know, why are y'all are just scattered and nobody knows what's going on and this. And so we don't feel like we know what's going on. And so then it makes us feel anxious, and then it makes us ask questions and want to be more involved than we actually should be.
Well,
And I think that's where a lot of that is playing into that.
two things I'd say about that would be, one is, you know, you all as a board need to make sure that there's clarity in what your expectation is.
And we've not done that.
When you as a board.
We've not done that.
And that's
And
all
that's
this
not
is.
been
We
done.
got to practice patience in a lot of things.
Yeah,
So
right.
like
Make sure there's
Mr.
clarity.
Bell has we would address with Dr.
See, we don't know
But,
because we don't
we
have
haven't
those,
even gotten a.
we don't have goals and expectations for
Well,
our
I think that you need to make sure that there's clarity between the board and the superintendent on what the expectations are.
Right,
Number one. Number two, we're all
Patience.
in a situation
Yeah,
where
Patience.
things ain't like they used to be.
right,
And, because I'm struggling with my board,
right, right.
because there's so much going on and it changes every day,
I know,
Yeah.
sometimes twice a day.
Yeah.
And, maybe you don't need to know all of that.
right,
Maybe you just need to know when a decision's being made or when a recommendation's gonna be brought to you. And, the minutia of trying to sort this mess out, and this is a unique situation, but the minutia of trying to sort this type of a pandemic and situation out is one where, sometimes we all just need to step back a little bit and let the process work and make sure there's clarity in what the expectation is as a whole.
and I think, like I said, we don't have that, we've not set that up with her.
You hadn't had time. I mean,
Right, right, and that's what I'm saying, it's all just kind of started, it all just kind of started with her, and it's just kind of, we've had to do this, and
She's
it's
hit
just
the
all
ground, she's hit the
new.
ground running.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just all new, and it's just all happening on the fly here, so everybody's just
Well,
trying to grasp on.
But also, in the meantime, we're also grappling with a situation where the superintendent just started the 1st of July. This last night was our first board meeting since she's been aboard. Sometimes.
No, we had call meetings.
We had call
meetings.
Right, officially, right.
So I'm saying, we really hadn't had the time that we generally have during school hours. We haven't had.
Well, maybe there'll be an opportunity for a retreat or something when things calm down a little bit. Maybe the superintendent can make some recommendations to you on, for now, during the pandemic, these are communications procedures. And again, it's just, first of all, you're not alone. Every district, I think, is barreling down the highway,
It's gonna get better in November.
ducking rocks that are coming off the truck.
Presidential election can make everything better. It just needs to get over.
So it's finding that balance, and it's making sure there's clarity and expectation. And it's also having a recognition of what's going on right now across the board.
Right.
In this district.
I was just bringing that up, that I think that all of that is playing into what's happening.
I would wholeheartedly agree. It's just unprecedented.
But I'm just saying, just like the third bullet, board officers make more appropriate counsel individual members. I mean, the individual members don't really have to consent to being counseled. But I'm saying everything we say, there's no teeth to doing anything. So you going on the good graces of every individual.
That's what's known as the democratic process.
I don't know about the democratic process.
Thank you.
But
I mean, it's a rare thing to have an elected body where there's uniformity 100% of the time. And where no counseling has to occur. It's just, like I said, look at the clips. We'll see the clips every day. We talked about this, the board being committee of the whole. Talk about it not being your job to fix things, ready to change them.
That's
That's Mike's favorite.
Problem is, your constituents don't necessarily know that, so when you talk to them, read this statement to them, this problem could end up requiring board action, and if I'm involved in it at this level, I will be unable to act on it as a member of the board. So it could be a violation, it could be a violation of due process, you really need to go through the proper channel. Okay, we got time for one more scenario here. A board member writes a weekly blog about life in rural South Carolina. In his most recent blog, he criticized the district's actions. He states that the board voted in favor of the actions, but that he disagrees and thinks the vote should have gone the other way. In the blog, he is asking to hear from others who support his take on the issue so he can continue to let the superintendent know his feelings.
I'm good. Don't know what a blog is. I'm good.
Blog's actually old school. I think I need to update this. You've got an opportunity at every meeting to voice your opinion, debate it, make the issue, vote, and move on. And it becomes a decision of the board. How can you ever move forward as a board if you're continually having to revisit issues that you've discussed in the past, debated in the past? Doesn't mean you can't come back and revisit something. I'm just saying it's something that people dig in on stuff. I think that undermines public confidence as a whole if you've got that kind of situation. And it happens all the time. I can name names of people out there where they just refuse to go along with what the board as a whole has voted on. But you get your opportunity to debate, ask questions, and then you vote. It's just important to respect that vote. I'm not going to be talking about advocacy. These are just some numbers from polls and surveys that are out there the past couple of years that really, especially now, I think in the pandemic, I find ourselves in. Public listens to what you say. Public has more confidence in their local elected school board than they do in government as a whole, than they do with school boards and school districts nationwide. And your folks locally have a lot of confidence in you. And I think that it's incumbent upon each of us to make sure that we take advantage of that. Use that credibility to be an advocate for the district. Advocacy big picture, I think we all kind of want the same things, improving educational outcomes for all students. Don't always have to agree on that, but you have to be on the same page when being an advocate. And again, it talks about communications. And, nothing pleases a legislator more than to have a locally elected body throwing different things at them. At that point, he don't have to do anything. He can just say, I'll figure it out, and come back and talk to me. So it lets them off the hook if you're not on the same page on issues. And again, I'm not talking about specific issues, I'm just saying in general. Meeting management, the purpose of, it's a very brief slide or two on this. Sole purpose of the meeting is to determine the collective will of majority in a fair and efficient manner. You've got policies that talk about meetings, BEC, executive sessions, and open meetings, board meeting notifications, agendas, what is a quorum of the board. You will follow Robert's Rules of Orders and minutes of board meetings. All of these are in your policies. Meeting goals, meetings need to be structured. Everyone has an opportunity to speak. Businesses discussed, not individuals. Do your best to reduce or eliminate conflict. Votes are conducted in a proper manner, and that board members are engaged in part of the process. The Freedom of Information Act focuses on notice requirements for open meetings. You conduct your business as a board in an open session unless you go into executive session. You don't have to go into executive session. The law allows you to go into executive session. It lists like 5 or 6 specific reasons you have to go in. You can go into executive session. And and you have policies, I think it's too small to read up there, but you have policies that say that confidentiality of executive sessions must be respected. You can have situations where something that you discuss in executive session is discussed publicly. Maybe it's a contract negotiation, maybe it's involving something related to,
Budget,
well, I don't know about budget, but
yeah, tax hike.
Legal.
we are live, right?
Yes, yes.
The law says you can go into executive sessions for specific reasons, contract negotiations, employment matters, disciplinary matters. The reason being is that if some of that gets out into the public, maybe you might become liable through the one that put that information out there and it ends up being incorrect. Somebody decides they don't like the fact that their secret information was discussed in public. So there's a reason to go into executive session. I would just say that you need to respect that confidentiality that attaches to executive session. And this last one is about that, and I think we,
Yeah, but what do you do with that? Because when you know that somebody's done that.
well, again, you counsel them. Sometimes you bring, I've had instances where boards have brought their attorneys in to talk to them about the potential for liability, because that's where it gets the tension. Is when somebody realizes that things that I'm talking about outside of executive session get me in legal trouble. That's where it gets somebody's attention, where it might hit them in the wallet. And so, you could have your attorney come in and meet with the board and talk about individual liability for things like that. Anybody have any questions or comments?
Question. Can boards have their own, company meeting?
Can boards have their own governing meeting,
Their own,
governing meeting,
their own rules about government?
rules about this?
As long as it doesn't run afoul of freedom of information.
This is be a question. I'm saying, when we go to executive session, our normal practice, nobody takes cell phone. Can a board say that we don't have cell phone on executive session?
You might get pushback to that, some of the other members of the board. You all, basically, you can determine who's gonna be in there. You have to follow the law as to what you talk about as you get in there. You go in there for contract negotiations relevant to, purchase of property, that's what you talk about in there. You don't talk about something else. I mean, if Susan wants to talk about what she heard about what happened at that school over here, on both of it, you all say we're not getting here to do that. We're not supposed to talk about that.
Yeah, but he's referring to when we're in there talking about selling a piece of property that a board member has a cell phone and is texting out.
Yep, you all
What
set your
we're
own,
discussing.
you all set your own rules related to that. You all can decide whether you want minutes in executive session. Some boards record executive session, and keep them hidden away. I don't recommend doing that. If you do that, they could be subject to being released if somebody makes a request for them to information. But you all set your own rules on whether cell phones are in there or not.
Is that a policy we have to pass, or is that just
And you can-
underwritten, kind of understood?
I don't recall seeing policies on that. I think that would be a rule that you ought to have. Might be some folks that push back against that. My elderly mother lives alone, and I'm not gonna come in here without my phone.
Yeah, I mean, having your phone is one thing, but having it up and texting while you're discussing a situation.
That's. Who all determine that kind of.
That's what I
You said that's your lawyer's answer.
Last night, your mom could have died many Kennedy before we got out.
Mine texted me and said, you want me to bring you your night coats?
I know it was a short meeting.
Anybody else have any questions, comments?
Thank you for.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you all for having me. I enjoyed the opportunity to get out and see some of my people. And it's good to see you all again face to face.
Your peoples.
It's peeps.
Probably the last time you see me.
Where are you going?
Home, the house. I'm not running.
And I was gonna ask her why this morning, but after last night, I
Somehow, I don't think we've seen the interview for last.
No.
She's going to have
Really?
volunteerism and all that.
I'm gonna show up at board meetings
You
and
gonna
get up and speak.
You're gonna be a head clerk.
Yeah.
All programs in the state.
They don't come. You gonna volunteer?
They say what you gotta say.
I'm not volunteers, yeah.
You volunteer to come to
Run for the house.
Huh?
But you run for the house.
Yeah. Ooh, I have to run against Mark.
We're not still alive. Hypothetically speaking. All right, well, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I appreciate you.
If anybody has follow-up questions, you know where to reach me.
Well, thank you so much for being here and for going over all the roles and responsibilities. It's very helpful for me as a new superintendent. So just want to say thank you for being here today.
My pleasure. Thank you. And y'all again, if anybody has a follow-up question, you can give me a call. Thank you.
Thank you.
You got
Safe
a
trip.
girl.
You going to Anderson? Oh, back to Anderson?
We've got to adjourn.
Yeah, I think he's,
Oh,
I'm
almost. I got to do it this year.
Let me say before we finish, because I always say that, and because I try to stay on the optimistic side, even though I'll lose sometimes too. But I always say that we have an opportunity to be a great board if we get out of the way of ourselves, you know. And I'm saying that because I want Mike to understand that. Because sometimes we come in, you know, and we have conflict, and we're gonna differ because we're just different people, you know. But we all understand we're here for kids in our community. That should be our focus. I mean, Terry and I, the only reason we didn't fight because I was lady. You know what I mean? We come to situations that's been pretty close to that, but I still consider her a friend. I don't, you know, we don't all out like that.
I'm in that fight too.
I mean, it's just a temporary thing, you know, but I think as long as we respect each other, you know, talk to each other, we'll be all right. With
I
that,
just
need a
express my opinion.
Huh?
I just express my opinion.
motion.
She also cuts grass, so you.
Yeah, that's right,
It's pretty
that's
good deal.
That's right. I cut grass too.
Yeah, sometimes it's real strong, you
And same to you.
know. Okay, with
You've been
that,
known to have your strong opinion too.
with that, I need a request on adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's a motion, properly second, adjournment, vote, say aye, opposed nay. So moved. Thank you very much. Thank
Mr.
you.
Chairman, I get a picture with you all. Y'all mind that?
We got individual.
No, we love pictures.
Or-